In today's video, we dive into a deck that you can get for free in MTG Arena right now. I'm not sure 100% how long you can get the deck for free, but as of right now, there is a code to redeem this current deck. We're going to be diving into the deck itself, talk about ways to upgrade it, and maybe show off a little bit of gameplay of the deck and kind of show you how the deck kind of works. With that being said, guys, if you like the video, hit that like button. It definitely helps out a lot. If you're new here, want to post new videos on the channel, hit that subscribe button. Puts a +1/+1 counter on the channel, which is definitely good for the YouTube algorithm. With that being said, let's just dive in the video and let's just talk about it. So this is the deck. It's called the Vengeant Angels. You can get this deck by going into your store tab on the desktop client and or on the browser on mobile by logging into the Wizards of the Coast website, I believe. Going into your account that way, go with the redeem code option, enter in the code Gameknights. I'll have it down in the description below if you want to just copy and paste it in some form of way, so you don't have to worry about trying to do it the right way if it's case sensitive or not. I don't really know. I entered it uppercase all lowercase and it worked, but then I tried to do it before I start recording and it didn't work, so I'll just have it down in the way I redeemed it, so in case you guys want to go ahead and do it that way, it makes it a little bit easier instead of having to type everything out. But with that being said, let's just kind of talk about the deck overall and kind of give you my little two cents on it, just on a general, just let's take a look at it kind of perspective. So it is an angel deck, it is a cleric deck, and it has a little bit of demons in it as well, which is definitely kind of interesting as we go into the D&D set, and there's some interesting cards that are coming out of it. There's going to be some more, I would assume, demons, clerics, possibly angels, just because these are creature types that definitely fit in that D&D lore. I think we had some spoilers of some cards that are kind of like, these, particularly anti-Vs. So it's definitely going to be interesting to kind of see how this works out. But from the first perspective, the deck overall is pretty solid in a way. It does have a few copies of some key cards for the deck, 2s and 3s of certain things. And then it has, one copy of certain rares, which are the more powerful cards in the deck. I don't think the deck contains a mythic, which is kind of interesting. Or it does contain a mythic. I apologize. This Arma Unleashed is the mythic of the deck. But overall, it's kind of like an interesting idea here. It is rotation proof. All these cards are going to be standard legal come September, so you're not going to have to worry about replacing any of them post-September. So it's definitely, if you're looking for a fresh start of something a little bit more up to date, that you want to go ahead and upgrade, this could be that deck. But overall, the deck is interesting on what it's trying to do. We are playing Clerics, we are playing Angels. We start off with Expedition Healer. It's a 2-drop Vigilance, 2/2. It has lifelink as long as you control another Cleric, which is definitely a pretty solid, basic, 2-drop. Overall, Vigilance is pretty key, and the idea of it possibly having lifelink if you have a Cleric out is definitely pretty cool. And some of our cards are like dual creature types, so it definitely helps out in that aspect. We have Luminarch Aspirant, which is another interesting card here. At the beginning of your combat, you get a +1/+1 counter target creature control. Some cards do gain benefits of us having +1/+1 counters on them. Overall, it's a pretty good card to kind of help pump our team, especially if we want to get in for some of that extra damage. Also, she can always pump herself, which is always very good. But overall, pretty good card. You may have seen it in mono white. It's definitely a solid card nonetheless. Then we got Youthful Valkyrie, another interesting card here. It's a 1/3 flyer. Whenever another angel enters the battlefield under our control, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on Youthful Valkyrie. So in the early game, you probably want to play her and then slowly build up other angels on the board, and eventually she becomes pretty big over time as the more angels you do play. Though I would say, because we do also play other creature types, it does get a little clunky, I think, to really get her super big. If we were really focused on just angels, she could become even bigger. But because we focus on other creature types, she doesn't really grow at the same pace as she would if it was a very angel-heavy tribal-style deck. They make Cleric of the Life Spawn. It's a 2-mana 2/2 vampire cleric. It's a very solid cleric, definitely in a Cleric's deck. Whenever another cleric enters the battlefield under our control, we gain 1 life. And whenever we gain life for the first time each turn, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on Clerics of Life Bond. So just like the Youthful Valkyrie, he is another creature in our board that kind of gets bigger when we do certain things. Either gain a life or playing another Cleric, he definitely can become rather large pretty quickly if our opponent can't do anything to really slow him down. Then we got Bound in Gold, which is kind of like a pacifism. I don't think there's going to be a pacifism that's technically standard legal other than one that comes in the starter deck. But if you're looking for one that's like standard legal per se, if you want to go ahead and craft this, in physical magic or want to play this in best of 3, Bound in Gold is kind of like a similar thing. It's a 3-mana enchantment or a enchant permanent can't attack, block, crew vehicles, and its activated abilities can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. Just an overall key card that helps slow down your opponent's things, slows down their creatures. Definitely a pretty interesting card here. I think it is kind of like that idea that pacifism is kind of going to be rotated out, so we're going to need some new card in white that kind of does the same thing. So definitely a pretty decent card for that 3-drop slot. Then we got Righteous Valkyrie. It's a 3-drop angel cleric, which definitely helps our Clerics of Life spawn, and Youthful Valkyrie has flying. It's a 2/4. When another angel or cleric enters the battlefield under our control, we gain life equal to that creature's toughness. So I mean, a lot of our clerics aren't, you know, the biggest toughness, but a lot of our angels do have a big, you know, toughness, you know, amount. So we're gonna definitely gain a decent amount of life, which is definitely very good. And then if we have 7 or more life total than our starting total, creatures we control get +2/+2. So especially if we're getting a lot of life, we can definitely, you know, get, you know, our creatures even bigger, which is definitely much better for us overall in the end. Then we get the Starnheim Aspirant, which is a human cleric. It benefits us playing angels because it makes our angel spells cost 2 less to cast. So overall, just making our angels that much cheaper. And it's a 3 mana, 2/2, you know, kind of creature, but you know, helps us, you know, make our other creatures that much cheaper to cast, which is, you know, a benefit to us because it can take an angel from costing, you know, 3 mana to costing 1 mana, or whatever, you know, if we have to play a particular color in order to play that angel. So definitely a pretty interesting card to have. 2 copies seems pretty decent, just because you don't want to draw a bunch of them and, you know, maybe discount your angels too dramatically to just their, you know, color casting costs. But at the same time too, you know, it's just an overall decent benefit to have when it comes to that. Then we get the Renegade Reaper. It's a 3 mana 2/3 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, we mill 4 cards. If we mill at least 1 angel card, we get to gain 4 life, which definitely helps out our life gain, you know, aspects of the deck. It's a 2/3 flyer, which is pretty solid. You know, yet again, like I said, it seems like a lot of the angels have the toughness, whereas the clerics are more so just an even balance of like toughness and power. But overall, just a decent way to kind of gain some of that additional life, and flying's always a good benefit as well. Then we got Taberax, the Hope's Demise. It's a 3 mana demon cleric, legendary creature. It has lifelink as long as it has 5 or more +1/+1 counters on it. We do have ways of putting +1/+1 counters on it. You know, from like Valkyrie, Luminarch Aspirant. We also have Closing Statement in the deck, which we'll go over as we get to that cost. But overall, pretty decent card. And whenever a non-token creature we control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on it. If that creature was a cleric, you may draw a card if we do lose a life. So the one, you know, it has kind of like, you know, a way for us to pay a little bit of life to get a little bit of card draw. Because it's white and black, we don't have a lot of ways to draw a lot of cards, but having a way to possibly draw it in the later game, you know, is definitely pretty good there. Then we got Starnheim Unleashed, which is an interesting card here. It's a card that costs 4 mana. We can create a 4/4 white angel warrior creature token with flying and vigilance. If this spell is foretold, create X of those tokens instead. So essentially, you pay X, which could be anything from 1, 2, 3, 4. Depending on how much mana you have, you can create that many angel tokens. So, you know, if you're paying 3, you're going to technically pay 6 mana plus the white, which, you know, is definitely pretty good. You can definitely fill up a party pretty quickly. Combine that with like something like Youthful Valkyrie, it will definitely cause a lot of triggers. Definitely very good if you're trying to get very wide very quickly. Worst case scenario, you can always play for its 4 mana if you really just need that 4-drop creature just to kind of slow down your opponent's board. Then we get the Skemfar Shadow Sage, a 4 mana 2/5 elf cleric. When it enters the battlefield, choose 1. Each opponent loses X life, where X is the greatest number of creatures. X is the greatest number of creatures you control that have that creature type in common. And then, or we can have gain X life, where X is the greatest number of creatures we control that have the greatest creature type in common. So essentially, if we choose something like Clerics, if we have, you know, X amount of Clerics, we'll gain X life. If we have X amount of Clerics, we make our opponent lose X life. So it's one of those things, depending on what the situation is, we can, you know, choose whatever creature type we need to possibly make our opponent lose and us gain life, depending on which one we want to do. And it's a 2/5, which definitely, you know, lines up pretty good with the Righteous Valkyrie. Then we got Skull Raid, which is an interesting discard spell. It's a 4 mana discard spell. Target opponent discards 2 cards. If fewer than 2 cards were discarded this way, you draw cards equal to the difference. So essentially, in the early game, you can maybe, you know, hit your opponent's hand, make them discard 2 cards. In the late game, if your opponent doesn't have a lot of cards in hand, or any cards in hand, you technically draw cards for 2 mana, which is definitely pretty good. Maybe make your opponent discard a card, or you draw a card, which is definitely a pretty interesting thing. I'm not really sure how I feel about this. I did limited testing as I'm actually recording this. I may do some gameplay over, as you may see already. But definitely an interesting card overall and what it can do. Then we got the Ventral Reaper. It's a 4 mana 2/3 flyer, Death Touch Haster that we can foretell. It's a 2/3. So definitely an interesting card that you can kind of set up, you know, play it on like turn 3, turn 4, depending on what the situation is, you know, pay for that cheaper mana, which is definitely very good. If we had the Starnheim Aspirant out, we can then definitely play it for just the 1 black and a 1 colorless, or I think the foretell also gets cheaper, so you can then play for just the black, which is definitely pretty good. But just an overall solid body. It definitely makes it very awkward for your opponent to attack into you if you have this out, just because it has the Death Touch, which Death Touch helps, you know, slow down, you know, creatures that are bigger than it. But overall, pretty interesting card, you know, just kind of have in the deck to kind of help, you know, overall with our angel / cleric kind of tribal style deck. Then we got Fiercest Retribution. It's a saga, very solid saga. Helps us create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. Until end of turn, angels we control gain tap, destroy target creature with power less than this creature's power. And then the third chapter, Angels we control gain double strike on a turn. So essentially the last chapter is like a finisher there. So you want to probably have as many Angels out as possible because a lot of them have flying. They'll just fly over, hopefully deal double the damage they currently have power-wise, and kind of end the game out that way. Definitely a pretty good card here. Definitely helps us kind of ramp up what we're trying to do against our opponent, and has like cool aspects of making a creature, having a little bit of removal if we want to use that ability, and also in, you know, giving our creatures that much more aggressiveness to attack in and swing for some big damage. Then we get into the 5-drop slot, which is kind of interesting here. Just overall, you know, we got Closing Statement, which is a new card from Strixhaven if you haven't seen it. It's a 5-mana removal spell, but costs 2 less to cast during our end step, which is definitely kind of interesting. And it destroys target creature or planeswalker we don't control, and then we get to put a +1/+1 counter on one of our creatures we control, which in all is not too bad. I don't really know. It's kind of, sometimes it feels awkward because it's like, you know, you have to get to the end of your turn to then remove a creature. But, you know, it's kind of like an interesting ability to kind of have on a particular card. So overall, pretty interesting card. Kind of going to see how this kind of, you know, goes about as we kind of get into like the newer removal spells and what is going to become the more popular ones. But I feel like for this color scheme and what we're trying to do in this deck, I feel like it works. Then we got Rampage of the Valkyries. It's another interesting card here that you may have seen pop up in Angel decks. And the idea here, it's a 5-mana enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you get a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. And then whenever an angel we control dies, each other player sacrifices a creature. So it's definitely a way to kind of tax our opponent if they want to kill our creatures in some sort of way. So they have to then sacrifice a creature. So definitely a way to slow down your opponent and make them double think if they really want to attack in, and also kill a creature in the process, because that means they're going to have to start stacking creatures to also, you know, to every time one of our creatures leave the battlefield, which is definitely very good. A little bit on the expensive side, but overall, if we can get this out and get, you know, a decent amount of angels out, it kind of puts our opponent in an awkward position to kind of not have to worry about, you know, makes our opponent have to worry about if they want to attack into us and or not, or be a little bit aggressive. So it definitely slows the game down a bit. Then we got Fiercest, Judge of the Valor. It's a 5-mana 2/4 flyer lifelinker. Whenever we cast a second spell each turn, look at the top 3 cards of our library. We get to put one of them to our hand and the rest into our graveyard. So definitely interesting way to kind of dig a little bit deeper into the deck. Like I said, Black and White doesn't have a lot of great ways to draw a little bit deeper into the deck, so having something like this is definitely very good. You know, just to kind of help us dig a little bit deeper. I don't know if we're going to be playing a bunch of spells, you know, every turn, but, you know, having the ability to possibly draw a little bit is definitely very good, and milling in the process is an okay effect. We don't really have a way to return anything, but, you know, it's a decent card to have just overall in the deck in the top end, and also has flying and lifelink, which also helps us with our life gain kind of style as well. Then the last card here we have is Valkyrie Harbinger. It's a 6-mana 4/5 fly lifelinker. At the beginning of each end step, if we gain 4 more life this turn, we get to create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. So just 4 technically angel warriors. I think all the angels are flying and vigilance in the deck that we create with token wise, and it's a 4/5 itself with flying. So if we can attack him with this, we're going to be, you know, definitely gaining the 4 life to then make the 4/4 white angel creature token afterwards. So definitely overall very good angel, kind of top ends the deck, you know, helps us kind of finish hopefully off our opponent if we can get to this point of the game. But overall pretty interesting deck nonetheless, and the mana base is pretty straightforward. It's 10 plains, 9 swamps, 1 of the Snarls, and 4 copies of the campuses. So overall pretty interesting deck, you know, what it's trying to do. It's trying to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and the fact that it is future rotation proof is definitely very good if this is where you're looking to start. Maybe if you're just newer to the game, just an overall decent deck that you can get for free to help boost your collection as well. So we are back to the upgraded version of the deck, and kind of like still messing around kind of with numbers and things like that exactly in the deck, and kind of figuring out what kind of works, what kind of doesn't, what I can kind of remove and kind of tweak. So this is kind of like a list that even if you are also you know, looking at this deck for the first time and looking to, you know, add things, you can always go ahead. I also wanted to keep the idea of keeping it future rotation proof, so I didn't add any cards that are technically in standard at the moment. But if you have cards that you want to add in place of other cards that you may not have just yet, you can definitely go ahead and do so. As you know, I just, like I said, I was trying to keep that, like, you know, rotation proof in mind. So if you, like I said, want to, you know, swap things out that you feel like you would rather play, then go ahead and do that. But what I did is I kind of added in 1 additional copy of Limerarch Aspirant. This is something I probably maybe want to increase to 4 copies and maybe cut down something else that I just feel like isn't that great. But at the moment I have 2. I'm still messing around with the numbers exactly. Then we got 4 copies of Youthful Valkyrie. Just went up from the 3 originally in the deck to 4, just because you want to draw this kind of consistently. It's because our deck isn't playing 1-drops. We want to definitely draw our 2-drop slot. Then we get the Cleric of the Life Bond. Yet again, went from 3 to 4. Just another good card in the deck, especially for keeping it the Clerics and Angel style. So definitely another good card that helps us kind of, you know, just get some more power on the battlefield. Went up to 2 copies of Righteous Valkyrie. This is probably something you probably want to increase to probably like 4 copies just because it's a good card. Maybe cut like out something like Renegade Reaper and put in, you know, 4 more copies. So that's something I probably will do. So if you see the deck list, I may change it at the time I post it. Just kind of give you an idea of what I went ahead and upgraded. I just think this is a card you definitely wanted to draw. You know, like I said, Renegade Reaper I think is a card I may cut out. But it is a good way, you know, good card. It's maybe a little bit too slow, especially if you want to get a little bit more aggressive in that manner. Let me add it in another copy of Taberax, Hope's Demise. It's an interesting card. It's definitely a cool card if we can get the counters on it that it needs to get the lifelink and whatnot. But it's something I don't think you need, you know, 4 copies of. Maybe at most 3, just because it's legendary as well. You can't have multiples out. I would probably cut these out and put those in. But, you know, he's definitely a cool card that you may want to draw, you know, some of the time. So definitely 2 copies is at least, I would say, is probably what you want to play. So in the removal slot, we add in Umbrio Juke. It's another interesting card here. I'm not 100% sure if I'm sold on it. But like keeping it in mind, you know, the idea of keeping it future-proof, I just thought it was like a decent card to kind of, you know, balance out with, you know, closing statement. So I think, you know, Umbrio Juke is interesting here because you can choose one depending on what the situation is. You can make a player sacrifice a creature or planeswalker, which is definitely cool, especially in like control matchups where they don't have a lot of creatures. So maybe it's a good way to kind of get ahead that way. Worst case scenario, you can at instant speed play a 2/1 black flyer with, you know, flying, which is definitely, you know, an okay replacement. At the same time too, now thinking about it, there's other options. You got Poison the Cup, which is also rotation proof, which is definitely a good option. I don't think there's anything else that really stands out to me that I can really think of that's, you know, in the 3-drop slot. But at the same time, too, you can always go ahead and play more copies of Closing Statement, which I only have 2 copies still in. Maybe I'll increase that as well so that we can draw more removal. But in the 4-drop slot, we actually add in 1 more copy of Starnheim Unleashed. I think this is an okay card, but this is kind of like a card that you don't want to draw a bunch of. I think it's like you want to draw 1, maybe foretell it in the early game, and then kind of save it for that late game to have that big flip. So having 2 copies kind of makes it seem like, you know, that there's a decent chance of drawing it during your games. So I went with 2 copies of it overall. Then I add in Babel Mastery, which is another interesting removal spell in the deck, as in it can cost 2 mana if we wanted to, but your opponent gets to draw a card in the process. But the benefit of us either playing for 4 mana or 2 mana is that we get to exile target creature or planeswalker, so it completely gets removed from the game, which is definitely very good. Going to the exile zone is definitely very good. It's instant speed, so it's also very beneficial to us. And I do think this is kind of like why I didn't add in more copies of Closing Statement, but I do like this card a lot, and I do think the flexibility of making it cheaper is always very good depending on the situation. Then we have 2 copies of Fiercest Retribution. I only added 2 copies here just because I think it's a decent saga. It's not the saga I want to hit all the time, but if we do hit it, it helps our angels out that much more. But I do think it's something because of the mana cost. It's kind of one of those awkward things. Like I'm not sure 100% how I feel about it, but it's definitely a very angel-heavy saga. But, you know, if you want to add more copies, you definitely can. And then we got Closing Statement. I do think this is something I probably want to go up to like at least 3 copies, maybe cut down the jukes to 2 and then go up to 3 copies of the Closing Statement. I think that's kind of probably the way I do it because technically both of those can be 3-drop removals. I think Juke is cool. Closing Statement is cool as well. The benefit is we do get +1/+1 counters on target creature we control, which is definitely very good. Then I went to 4 copies of Rampage and Valkyries. It's a 5 mana enchantment. It helps us trade a creature. Makes, you know, our opponents have to think about if they really want to remove our angel creature tokens. This is also another good card to have. You know, it kind of gets around indestructible. So if your opponent has an indestructible thing, creature-wise, you know, even if your angel dies, they still have to sacrifice their indestructible creature just because indestructible doesn't get rid of sacrifice abilities. So definitely a cool, like, kind of play around that way. So overall, pretty interesting. And I kept in the Fuji just because, you know, it's an okay angel. You know, it's an idea that we kind of get that little bit of extra digging into our deck to kind of, you know, help us find maybe a card we're looking for. Yet again, the deck isn't on the side that we're going to be playing a ton of spells every turn. But, you know, the idea, if that is a possibility, you know, again, that little bit of an extra card draw is very good. And also has Fly and the Lifelink, which I do think is pretty great. Then we got the Valkyrie Harbinger. Just kept the 1 copy. Yet again, it's another card that if we get there and we get it out, it's definitely great. Yet again, I know it's not a legendary creature, but I do think it's a little bit on the expensive side. With if you're playing in the best of 1, it is a little bit, you know, more of aggressive meta. So, you know, playing a lot of 6-drops is not the greatest, but, you know, having it just in case you do draw is definitely good in that process. As for lands, I didn't really change too much. I kind of cut down the plains and swamps, added in pathways. added in more snarls and kept in 1 silver coal campus, just for the idea of, you know, in the late game, if we were really looking for something or an answer, we can always have the scry ability available. But overall, pretty standard, you know, solid, you know, mana base overall. You have 8, 7, 4, 4, and 1, which I think comes out to 24 lands, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, do math. So overall, pretty interesting deck. Yet again, I'm still tweaking the numbers. I'm still kind of fairly new to the deck overall. I've only probably played like a handful of games. And, you know, I've had mixed results just because I am playing very limited in the sense of I'm only playing cards that are from Zendikar Rise and up. So that's why you don't see any of the key cards that you would see typically in these cards. There's no Heartless Axe, there's no Eliminates, there's none of the cards from, you know, Throne of Eldraine, you know, Theros, all those sets. You know, there's none of that stuff in this deck. But overall, it's a fun deck to, you know, have. Definitely gets you set up for the future if this is something, or maybe a deck you were already eyeing and you were looking to kind of go about an upgrade. I may actually even look at an Orzhov Angel deck I did prior and kind of look at that list and kind of compare it to this one. But that one I didn't have any Clerics and I think it was more focused on Angels, so that's definitely something you could always look into as well if you want to get out of maybe the Clerics and just focus on just Angels. I mean, it's up to you. But with that being said, guys, I mean, if you like the video, hit that like button. It definitely helps out a lot. If you're new here, when I post new videos on the channel, hit that subscribe button. But with it, until next time, guys, I'll see you in the next video. Just before I go, I just wanted to give a special thank you to all the supporters of the channel. If you see your name here, I appreciate you clicking that join button or clicking the link down in the description below if you want to become a channel member here on the channel and support the channel in some financial way. With that being said, guys, until the next time, see you later.